Senator Patterson, do you have questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair.
You have the call.
I want to go to this issue of the social cohesion and other related grants that we discussed at the previous round of estimates. I got an answer to a question on notice, SE 24189, which stated that no groups have had their funding rescinded. Is that still the case today?
I believe it is, Senator, but I'll get Ms Chatterjee to rejoin me at the table.
Thank you. Apologies, Ms Chatterjee, you're a frequent flyer today.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I tabled a long document at that round of estimates which showed those organisations and directors of those organisations involved in open praise for listed terrorist organisations and terrorists, incitement to violence against the Jewish community, anti-Semitism and other extremist content. So is it that the government is not concerned about that content, or that once the grants were paid there was nothing that could be done to rescind them?
So, Senator, I think we provided evidence last time about the manner in which we went about the awarding of the grants. The grants are fundamentally there to support the community, and as we gave evidence last time, the selection of the organisations was not actually about views of individuals associated with the organisations, but their track record of delivering outcomes for their communities and, of course, the consistency with the grant guidelines. So,
glorifying terrorism is not a relevant criteria for deciding if whether someone's appropriate to receive a grant like this?
So, Senator, I've just explained the
and that's why I'm asking
process.
for clarification, so that it's not an issue if a grant recipient has glorified terrorism.
Senator, I can only repeat our evidence that we in fact assessed the grants against the criteria and the capacity of the organisations to provide support to their communities.
Okay, so one of those organisations specifically was Palestinian Action Relief and Action, which received a $1.375 million grant on the 6th of September. They were specifically invited to apply for the grant by Mr Hill, the Assistant Minister. That's a group that has met with the Prime Minister, met with the Minister for Home Affairs, met with the Education Minister, including one photograph looks like in the Prime Minister's office, meeting with him. Ms Reem Burrows is a director of PARA, and after she received this fund, after her organisation received this funding, she posted on her Instagram account a reference to Yahya Sinwar. She said, and I quote, "Yahya Sinwar's final moment gave us even more strength to stand up against the atrocities the powers that be supported or ignored for over 8 decades, as well as the genocide today. That was our real-life Palestinian Braveheart moment, freedom." That appears to be a pretty explicit endorsement of a deceased terrorist from a listed terrorist organisation. That wasn't enough to cause a grant like that to be re-evaluated?
Senator, the funding agreement that the department enters into is with the organisation, not with the individual, and it is the due diligence processes that we outlined in our previous evidence at the last estimates was around the assessment of the capacity and capability of the organisation to deliver on the public purpose for which it's been provided funding.
Yes, but some other examples I've provided are not just of directors of the organisations, it's organisations themselves. I won't go through it in detail now because we've done that previously, and it doesn't seem material to me, based on your answer just then, whether it was the organisation or not. If the organisation shared exactly that same material, would that be grounds for cancelling the grant?
I think the point that Ms Chatterjee was making, Senator, was that we're assessing the capacity of the organisation to fulfil the requirements of the grant.
Yes, and some of these grants have been handed out on the basis that they're to promote social cohesion in Australia. And so I'd ask you, their capacity to deliver social cohesion would depend in part on whether or not they endorse and facilitate extremism, wouldn't it?
So, Senator, there are specific provisions within the grant which are monitored by the team to ensure that the objectives of the grant are being achieved.
Yes, and so is it consistent with the grant objectives? Another post on the 18th of October from Ms Borrows, which says, "When will they realise every time they martyr a leader, the resistance only grows stronger? We witnessed today a leader fighting in the trenches to protect his people and was defiant till his very last breath. Now millions more will rise up to protect the innocent and fight for their freedom." Another reference to Mr Sinmeier. Is that consistent with the grant guidelines for that organisation? There's nothing in the grant guidelines that say it's not acceptable to praise a terrorist organisation?
Senator, the guidelines go to specific capacity issues which Ms Chatterjee can outline for you if that's helpful.
Given that we have such a serious problem with anti-Semitism and social cohesion in this country, don't you think it would be a good idea to have in the grant guidelines or in the agreement you enter into with these organisations that they're not involved in promoting extremism or glorifying terrorism?
Thank you. Senator, I think that's asking for an opinion.
Okay, well, if you're not willing to express a view on that, I accept that, although I would have thought that it's not a high bar to say we don't want people to support terrorism who are involved in promoting social cohesion in the middle of a social cohesion crisis. Is the government contemplating any further grants to promote social cohesion?
Is the government...
Does the government have any further social cohesion grants out for approval, open for application?
Senator, as part of the $25 million social cohesion package, the competitive grants round for the Australian, Palestinian, Muslim and Arab communities process is completing assessment and will be considered by government.
Okay, what's the timeline for a decision on that?
Senator, my team have just finalised those final elements of the assessment and providing recommendations to the Assistant Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Okay, as part of this round of upcoming grants, has any due diligence been done on the organisations or their directors to see whether they have been involved in fomenting dissent or promoting anti-Semitism or glorifying terrorism?
Senator, the assessment associated with the the APMAC round is the due diligence that's been conducted is consistent with the Commonwealth Grants framework and includes the legal capacity of the organisation, the eligibility criteria of the grant round, the review of information that we've been provided from community liaison officers in our network around the country who engage with organisations, self-declared information about criminal activity and legal and financial matters that could impact on the delivery of the grant.
So does it include a review of any of their social media content?
No, Senator.
So is there a risk that we will about to again hand taxpayers' money to extremists? How confident can you be that this round of social cohesion grants won't go to anyone who's praised a terrorist organisation or a terrorist?
Senator, I think Ms Chatterjee's just outlined the process that we will take to review the applications.
Yeah, I'm concerned based on the answer that it won't be any different to the first round or previous rounds, and that there's a high risk that again we'll have organisations receiving taxpayers' money to promote social cohesion who are actually undermining social cohesion. Isn't that a public policy problem?
Senator, I don't think we have anything to add to our previous evidence.
Okay. Minister, are you comfortable with taxpayers' money for social cohesion going to people who praise terrorists?
Well, of course, the government has done an enormous amount already to try to improve social cohesion. I would make the point that comments from particular individuals associated with a group do not necessarily represent the views of that group. And it wouldn't take me very much time to find outrageous comments on all sorts of topics made by coalition MPs and senators that does not preclude those parties receiving public funding for election campaigns. So I'm not sure that it's fair to hold some organisations to a different standard to others. I think I reject every single one of the statements that have been made by those individuals, categorically. But as I say, I don't think it's fair to characterise those individual statements as the views of those organisations.
Last time in Senate estimates, I provided you some examples of organisations who'd promoted those views on their official social media accounts. So would it trouble you if not the directors? You're fine with the directors endorsing terrorism, but if the organisations themselves endorse terrorism, is that a problem?
I'm not sure who's responsible for the administration of those social media pages. And as I say, you know, for example, there's a Liberal Party senator who I won't name, out of respect for the minister as an individual, who has referred to the fictitious crisis of Islamophobia. Now, we don't hold that comment, which I, and I would hope you, reject against the Liberal Party as a whole, which receives public funding.
Yeah, sure, Minister, but political parties receive public funding because they are entitled to under the law, because they receive a certain number of votes, and you know how that system works. This is a discretionary grant that your government is about to hand out to a series of organisations, apparently without having done any due diligence, as to whether social cohesion grant recipients are themselves undermining social cohesion by endorsing terrorism. This is not just like views we might disagree with. This is endorsing terrorists and terrorism. Surely you can say it's not appropriate for taxpayers' money to go to people who endorse terrorism.
I don't think those comments are appropriate, just as I think that Liberal Party senators' comments about Islamophobia being fictitious are appropriate. The department does its due diligence on organisations. It has criteria for funding them. And I think it's a bit of a dangerous trend to hold an organisation as a whole accountable for the comments of individual members, because if we did that, you know, Senator Antics had plenty to say about plenty of topics over the years.
Been wrong about what?
Well, there you go. He doesn't resile from all sorts of outrageous and divisive comments that he's made, and we don't hold that against the Liberal Party as a whole. And equally, I think that we should.
Senator.
Well, I'm glad you finally contributed something today, Senator Antic.
Senators, Minister, Senator.
So, Senator Patterson, I think you understand the point I'm making.
Not really.
Senator Patterson, I'll have to share the call in a few minutes.
Thank you. I'm happy to end on this. I don't really understand your point, Minister, because these are grants handed out by the department to promote social cohesion, and some organisations which have received those grants in the past have undermined social cohesion. The policy of your own government is not being delivered, in fact.
Well, I don't think that's correct, because the department has already talked to you about and criteria for these grants are that the particular groups undertake work to boost social cohesion.
Yes.
One of the examples we've provided before is the, I think it's the United Muslims Organisation, I think it is, or association, which has done terrific work to improve social cohesion and to work with young Muslim Australians about these issues, and I don't think it's fair to deny those types of organisations, which on the whole do positive work towards social cohesion, and to deny them funding because of statements that might be made by an individual associated with that entity.
So Ahmed Bassel, who's associated with Sydney Community Connect, posted a social media tile which had pictures of the Biden administration cabinet members and an Israeli flag next to the Jewish members of the cabinet. He said, Jews make up less than 2% of the population but hold every senior level cabinet position in the Biden administration except Secretary of Defence. How on earth is an organisation which employs people like that, which has members like that, an appropriate recipient of a taxpayer-funded grant to promote social cohesion?
Well,
how does promoting conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the US government consistent with your objectives?
I find those views repugnant.
Well, what are you going to do about it?
And I completely disagree with them.
Well, what should you do about it?
And just as I find various statements that Senator Antic has made over the years repugnant, just as I find various statements that were made by Senator Rennick when you had him in your party, or Mr Craig Kelly when you had him in your party.
That's a diversion and a deflection.
No, the point you're trying to make, Senator Patterson.
Senator Antic, I've called you to order already.
Senator Antic.
No, Senator Minister.